Hello and welcome to Living Web Live, our second live stream. I'm sorry about the delay here today. We did indeed have some profound technical difficulties that have now been overcome. So really happy to be here with you today. Happy spring. We are here on the spring equinox with Patryk Battle joining us, and we'll be talking about some local food, farm, and garden news, some great memories from this last weekend at Organic Growers School, and lots of interesting topics for you here today, as well as Pat's gardening expertise, and an homage to Joe Hollis, our local seed and plant hero who pioneered awareness of the Asian and Chinese medicinals here in the mountains, who inspired thousands of people over his nearly 40 years there at Mountain Garden. So we'll have a special tribute here today for Joe, and hearing from some of our other, I'm over here now, right? That's from some of our other very cherished elders and wonderful stewards of our awareness here in the mountains of seeds, agriculture, organic growing. We'll also be hearing their regard to that, Lee Barnes and Janine Davis. So glad you're here with us today. It's going to be an exciting time. If you've got some specific gardening questions that you would like addressed at the end of this hour, then please put them in our chat, okay, our YouTube chat. Join us on YouTube here and get those questions in. We will address them at the end of today's live stream. All right, Pat, welcome. Thank you for
Good
being
to be here.
here.
Yep. Always fun to connect again.
It's been a heck of a winter, not too harsh, right? As far as things go, we've had some zones even changing regarding garden
They just keep changing.
time. The climate change is
yeah.
literally being remapped on gardening zone things for those who want to still pretend it's not happening. It's in print, it's happening. Lots of changes are going on all over. But here we are. It's been a fairly cool spring, right? Which is great.
Yeah, I always prefer a cool spring. I like it to go slow, let the plants get up, get their roots down, let the bugs take their time to come out. Though I did see in a greenhouse my first harlequin bug. It's about 3 weeks ago now that I saw my first imported cabbage worm butterfly, the white ones with the black spot. And I asked Richard McDonald, Dr. McBug, how long after I see them are they going to have a full-grown adult chewing on my plants? And it's 2 weeks.
Ooh,
So it's time to do something about that. I don't have my farmscaping going on my my new homestead, back up at my permanent home. And so I need to get up there and spray some BT. I have a bunch of bachelor buttons, calendula, and other flowers I'll be putting in. So within one season, I won't have to think about it nearly as much. It'll be on automatic,
That's right. As Pat always teaches, that when we have a biodiversity of insects out there all working together, doing their part in the garden, it's a self-control. It's an organic pest control way of doing things. And Pat has quite extensive videos on that as well on our channel here at Living.
It all starts with growing the food for the insects. That's the name of
Yes.
the game.
Yes, exactly. Well, it was a really great weekend at Organic Growers School. This was our full page ad as an anchor sponsor there, and many years of teaching and growing here in the mountains. I wanted to mention it, and it's always the big, kind of like a big event to really get everybody excited and thinking about the whole year. It's really fun because farmers just spend a lot of time alone.
We do, and being in the hallways. I didn't get to attend a single class that I wasn't presenting at. I ended up presenting at 2.5 classes that I wasn't scheduled for because our friend and former video presenter for us, Troy Hinkie, got sick. So I did his compost tea talk, and then somebody else couldn't present on Sunday. So Richard and I took his talk. So we spent 3 hours in a row talking about the same subject. It was fun.
Oh, wow. Yes, you did quite the marathon. Pat was running around, picking up classes here and there to help out with Troy, and we hope he's gotten better now. We're excited because our viewers here on the channel, our YouTube channel here, have voted that was their next favorite video for us to get edited and put out there for you. So that's just about done and needs to be exported, uploaded. So look for the next part of the Troy Hinkie Compost Tea and Compost Tea workshop that we had at our farm a while back. So he's still out there teaching and doing well, but yeah, we wish him the best. And It was great seeing you, and we had some turmeric for sale and Dr. McBug, of course. What were some of your highlights this weekend, Pat?
Well, it was real fun to do the compost tea because I haven't done it in a while. And to just find all the people in the different places they were at and the excitement they had for microbes and understanding, you know, the compost tea is not about getting a bunch of nutrients out there, but about getting a little bit of nutrition maybe and a lot of life.
Oh, okay, yes.
And so I had, you know, an orchardist who was just on fire about it, you know, and just a whole bunch of people on different levels that were just excited about that, you know, and then the insect thing is always exciting, you know, and all kinds of people for the first time realizing they don't need to spray to control bugs.
Oh,
That's always exciting. And then people who enjoy chiming in, and indeed there was a major monarch butterfly person there, and I gave my rap about how you do not need to kill tachinid flies to get monarch butterflies to thrive. You know, there's one that preys on those. You know,
was that Ina Warren?
I think it was, yeah.
Ina
It was like-
Warren, my monarch angel. I call her the monarch angel. I actually didn't get to see her, but I've been messaging with her since then. And I saw her husband. I said, "Hey, Ina Warren's husband." She's a real hero. She wrote to me. She's got the monarchs in her heart, and that's so great to hear. Right? We do not have to militarize and weaponize and poison our own gardens. It's really great.
It's not about controlling one insect so another insect does well. It's about letting the web of life be vibrant. And these insects have been in relationship forever. We just have to let the natural systems thrive.
Right, and building more life, like it says right here. We build life, right?
Yeah.
Building more life so that the biodiversity in the living web supports the balance, right? And
Yeah.
that's the name of the game. That's why we're Living Web Farms with the building life, because then life takes care of itself, right?
Right. And it's always fun to see all the young people that are just on fire about it. You know, they get it. You know, we're not going to have a future if we don't get it.
Oh, wow. Did I have some exciting conversations with some super fired up, inspired young people. Ben, the new head of the JPI, Josephine Porter Institute, a young, excited young man leading the way in helping. They've got a biodynamic prep thing coming up, 3-day event in June. Be aware of that if you've ever wanted to learn how to make them in person. Exciting new young leaders. There was a young gentleman, Kyle, I met with the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. He's helping Ira and Ira Wallace. And if you don't know who Ira is, she is a wonderful matriarch here of seeds and heirloom seeds. She has founded Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, a wonderful seed catalog I encourage you to get. These are from the conference this weekend. I just wanted to honor some of those participants because when you see Southern Exposure there, they are paying to have a booth to support organic growers in our region at the Organic Grower School. Same with Fedco. We've often recommended the Fedco catalog. Pat talks about what
One
an
of my favorite companies by
educational,
far. Yeah.
yeah, this is an educational resource every bit as much as a seed catalog.
They were the first company to say, we will not sell any Monsanto-owned seed.
They stood
like
up
that.
for the growers,
Just
right?
yeah.
And there they are standing up again to keep those heirloom seeds safe because they're not safe with GMOs, right? They contaminate the heirloom seeds. And then we had Seven Springs Farm Supply there. You can get lots of great stuff, many items that Pat recommends in lots of our videos, a wonderful farm supply store. And then I was talking to the founder and owner of Dirtcraft, a great gentleman there. He and his wife were doing their booth, and they're really supporting life in the soil as well to help you grow better plants. And then just a couple of others that I had collected. A local spice company using organic local ingredients, the Well Seasoned Table, making really delicious things to season your food with. And then there was the Honeybee Hemp Farm out there. So great to see those folks at Organic Grower School. And of course, Living Web Farms, so proud to be there. And Pat, a veteran teacher, so many years. How many years has Organic Grower School been happening,
I think
Pat?
it's about 31 now, pretty sure. I think it was the 30th anniversary 2 years ago, so maybe 32. I'm thinking, let's see, 90. I first presented in 94. So that's you know, it's about 30 could be 32 years right now.
Yeah, right at 30 years.
And that was the second year when I presented in the second year, and then I
Wow,
went
so
on to the
31.
steering. I went on to the steering committee right after that, and was, you know, part of steering it. We weren't even a nonprofit. We just, you know,
Right.
we had an informal steering committee, and we'd get together, and it just grew exponentially. I mean, we thought it was really big when it was at 150, and it wasn't. You know, by the time I left the steering committee, we were at maybe 400 or 500. And now last, it was like, I think 1,200. We've been up to 1,400. It's one of the largest events in the Southeast. And
Right.
people come from far away to attend it, actually.
Excellent. Yeah, they do. I met people there from, there was people there from Florida, people there from Oregon. I met people there from all over the country, and I was kind of surprised. For me, it's such a local event. I was like, wow, these people flew and came and brought all their stuff and set up all these booths from quite a distance. So,
Well, there's a lot of diversity of presentation. People like
Mhm.
Tommy Leonard talking about contour lines, planting millions of fruit trees and nitrogen fixing trees in Guatemala. Got 35,000 of them planted here in the United States. Giving the trees away, doing the fundraising, giving the trees away. Lee Barnes always has the seed swap. I always make sure I get a few things up there to get swapped out. There's just a whole lot of deep knowledge. And you get that knowledge not only in the classrooms, but you get it at the trade booths, you get it in the hallways, and knowledge and passion. What's not to like about that?
right on. And 31 years now, and that it overlaps exactly with the Southeastern Permaculture Gathering, right? Which has many of the same elders and people and leaders, people like Tony Cleese, who we honor now, who has passed, and Chuck Marsh, who we miss so much, the Chuckster. I always feel his presence at Organic Grower School with Useful Plants Nursery, and just a wonderful, amazing permaculture guide, along with Lee, of course, with the now called the Southern Exchange Seed Share. He wants to get a seed share where you get seeds for free that people have been collecting and gathering, and he gives you planting guides and everything. And so those two kind of overlap with a lot of the great leaders who started it, including you, right?
Yeah, there
And
was
Dr. McBuck.
there was a small group that just was going to go organic. That's all there was to it. We would travel. In the old days, we would drive an hour and a half to 2 hours just to be with people. Once every few months, we'd get together. We're under the theoretical auspices of Carolina Farm Stewardship, but we didn't check to see if you remember. And people just got together, and eventually it ran out of steam because you didn't need to drive that far, because you could go to the farmer's market. You could find a lot of people that were into organic. But back in the mid 90s, the early 90s, there weren't as many of us.
Oh, yeah,
We
I
needed
remember.
community.
Yeah.
So we came together, and those are a lot of the usual suspects for all these organizations. They've been involved in all of them. And that was our job. And now we get to pass the baton. We look forward to other people doing that. And indeed, there's all kinds of subjects being taught by other people. I go to classes and I hear them using our words, and do I go, oh, those are my words? No, it's like, yes, it's my culture.
Yeah.
I'm happy that it's shared. I'm happy that it's out there. We want this information out there. We want the passion out there. We have to learn how to live with Gaia rather than, control Gaia. We're not going to survive if we think we can control Gaia. We can't. She will teach us over and over again that we are not in control.
If we could only control ourselves and stop poisoning the earth, things would heal much more rapidly, right? If we could stop that toxic flow. And this past weekend was just an example of a really positive flow, right? With that passing on of the new generation. I really, really felt that with the young gentlemen that I met who are now helping out. And, I wasn't able to be there this year, but that's definitely happening, and they are fired up and excited. And just like the mycorrhizae spreading through the soil, Pat, hearing those words that you have maybe even come up with at some point, and now they're being spread around in the classes. Like it's just the jargon, it's just the vernacular of what we talk, how we mention this, and in regenerative terms and all of that coming much more into the mainstream is really refreshing to see. And I've noticed it just in the last 12 years we've been doing Living Web Farms.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's growing. So the mycorrhizae is spreading. That's what's on our logo, if you notice there in the middle. That in the middle is a char particle, which has tons of space where mycorrhizae can totally inhabit that and supercharge your soil with life. And you see that mycorrhizae spreading from the center, and those spokes of the wheel representing stewardship, light, air, animals, plants, soil, water. That is the whole wheel of the web of life. And it spreads exponentially because nature works in abundance. And that's the good part, because otherwise there'd be no hope if we had to wait for the linear, right? Thank goodness we've got the superpowers of nature on our side.
When in doubt, go with life.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
I was very honored. I want to switch now from Organic Grower School, Pat, and wanted to mention briefly the upcoming Stream Restoration Conference. We were very honored to be the media sponsor a couple of years ago at the first one, and now this is the third one coming up on June 24th to the 26th. Stream restoration is a burgeoning field. We learned how to be involved with stream restoration at the Foster Creek Stream Restoration Project at one of our farms. Pat was instrumental in that with Marie Wise and making an amazing permaculture guild of plants that withstood the floods and the banks held, and now it's an amazing whole new system. How have you seen it thrive from being a straightened creek to being recurved, and what's happened there with the wildlife? Pat, what have you noticed?
It's been way impressive. One of the really impressive moments for me was after the Matthew, I think was it Matthew?
Hurricane.
Yeah, right. We only had a tropical storm, but our whole farm got flooded, but not from Foster Creek. Foster Creek has always been where it flooded. It used to be that you could literally see it take a right angle onto the farm and run across the farm like a whitewater river. But Foster Creek restoration broadened that, allowed it to spread out, gave it the floodplain it needed, and it was the only place that it flooded was right where it's at the confluence of Foster Creek and North Mills River, and it backed up a little bit from the river. We got flooded from the river, which we've dealt with since then. I can talk about in a minute. But after that, the water took a while to recede, and it was so fun to see all the egrets and herons living, in taking advantage of what was at a moment a wetland, and all the plants there are designed to take that. They can take flooding and they recover. Nothing washed out. All the plants held. We had no damage whatsoever. Interesting to see it evolve. Beaver came in, of course, and now we're going to be doing live staking again tomorrow. Mills River Partnership is bringing live staking in because beavers need their space, and we frankly can't let them have it because the restoration is too young. Once it's mature, then they can be there. But right now, they're just basically eating everything down the ground and flooding things to death. And so we've had to destroy their dams, and we've even had to kill some, which really breaks my heart. But in discussion, because we did such a different stream restoration, usually people just put in lots of live stakes. We grew plants.
Right.
We grew all kinds of fruit trees, pawpaws, native persimmon, thousands of elderberries, all of the edible aronias and viburnums, all kinds of diverse plants, basket willows, got from Joe Hollis, a huge array of basket willows, all kinds of useful plants. And so we had this depth of useful plants. And we actually had, according to the person who came in to say, yes, you can get the NRCS money to pay for this, he said, this is actually the most diverse, the greatest density, and the best survival of any planting I've ever seen. I've been doing this for 15 years. I cover the whole western half of the state.
Oh, wow.
And so it was very successful. It held very well. But because of that, we've had all kinds of educational groups come through. And one of the people who came through was a professor. And I was talking about the beaver problem. He said, you can make a pond and grow plants that they prefer to the plants that they're killing when they girdle the trees and all. And I said, could we also put a whole bunch of black willow and other things that grow really fast that they like? And he said, that'd make it even better. So we no longer are going to control that land. It's going to get passed on. But I'm putting the word out there. Somebody who's doing a stream restoration, and to NRCS, it needs to be an approved practice to put in like maybe even an 1/8 of an acre pond or a 1/16 of an acre pond, find out what these plants are. I have to get back to the professor and find out, and allow one resident family of beaver to be there. And those beaver will chase off the other beaver. And they will be feeding on the pond and not destroying. We have to let the beaver be there, but we will have to sustainably harvest them when they get to multiply too much, because we can only let so many beaver there. And that's the reality, is that humans have taken up the space of the wild. We have to give a lot of it back. We're not going to get farmers to give back that much land. So we got to come up with ways to allow some beavers to be there and still protect the planting. We couldn't let them do what they were doing because it would have killed the entire planting, which eventually would have washed out, which would have been a disaster. But we don't want to keep having to be at war with the beaver. Breaking beaver dams and killing beaver is nothing I ever want to do.
Right.
I want to find a way to let them be and let them have a piece of it.
Well, that's a great idea with the pond. And it's true about plants and things. I've had plenty of groundhogs eat my garden, and they're the same. They're very territorial as well. And so I basically planted a little section of garden for them so I could have a garden. Otherwise, there was going to be no having a garden that year. But yeah, that's a great idea.
Likewise, I see people go, what do I do about rabbits? It's like, put clover in your paths. They prefer that to everything else.
Yeah, just give them what they want. Share the food, share the wealth, right? Nature is abundantly wealthy. Let's share that.
The one thing you can't get them not to eat is legumes. So you can treat those seeds or those plants with neem and they won't eat it. Or I've used habanero peppers. All you got to do is get them up to a certain size and then they'll leave them alone. But aside from legumes, rabbits, basically, aside from the legumes that you grow, like beans and peas, they prefer the clover. You don't have to worry about it if you've got the clover growing.
Right.
There's always a way. It's about making peace and allowing life to happen. Trying to exclude life is a lot harder.
Right. It's always working it out some way, right? Work it out somehow. Just like with what people call, oh, it's a pest. No, it's a part of a whole system, integrated system of insects that rely on each other for predation and for replication, and go ahead and create the balance, right? But I want to just touch up and finish up on the Stream Restoration Conference. Yes, one
I can
moment.
show a clip of the stream if you look right here.
Yeah, let's check out a clip of the Foster Creek beautiful restoration project. There it is. That's an aerial shot. You see the curvature there, restored,
And that's grown up a lot now. There are trees that are like
much bigger.
25 feet tall now.
So we're here
25
at
feet
Foster
on
Creek
there.
along
So
North Mills
there's
River
Maria
Road in Mills River,
Wise.
North
She
Carolina.
is from the Mills River
We're the Mills River Partnership,
spearheaded
and I'm
this.
Maria
And
Wise,
this
the
is from
Executive
our
Director.
part one. We have a whole
We
video
work with
series
farmers
coming
and
about
residents of this
showing the entire
community
process of
to
before, during, and after.
improve
So this is
the
from
water
part
quality
one.
in the
You can
Mills
check out the
River
full-length
and its
video.
tributaries.
So just
And
briefly,
Foster
let me go
Creek
back
is a-
to just covering what's coming up at the exciting third annual now of this very much burgeoning science of stream restoration, the third National Stream Restoration Conference that is hosted by the Resource Institute. It's coming up again on June 24th to the 26th at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans, the Crescent City. I know Pat's got some history there, right on the edge of the French Quarter, so you can enjoy the city while participating in the conference. There is going to be some very interesting panels there. And by the way, when we were there at the first annual, I was allowed to go around and video, and I got 35 videos over 2 days to share with you on the channel, all about what was covered at that first conference. But go there live. The science is moving quickly and in good directions, I'm happy to say. You'll have 3 days of face-to-face interactions. Over 700 stream restoration professionals will be there. And there's going to be, basically, it's a conglomeration of 4 different regional stream restoration conferences, one watershed event. It is Mid-Atlantic Stream Restoration coming together with the Southwest Stream Restoration Conference and the Southeast. So the whole country covered there in June. Find out more, Stream Restoration Conference 2024. And on with that, Pat, and I just want to mention the name is called Rising to the Challenge, because it is a challenge to do things in a new way, but the benefits are amazing.
Well,
right?
and so many streams have been fixed by humans.
Yeah, fixed.
And that is problematic. And we need actually to be doing this work. That was what I touched on for a moment. We actually took our berms down on the riverside. We moved it back. We have a slightly raised road, so there's still a little bit of protection, but mostly we said, let the river come in, and we did another useful plant forest. I talked about giving up, and Greg Jennings corrected me. He said, Pat, you taught me, you're giving up nothing. You just switched it from agricultural vegetables and stuff to a useful plant forest. Pawpaws, persimmons, viburnums, all the plants that are useful to us. And it'll be more and more useful as we create an economy that's dependent on natural capital. Not the extraction of natural capital, but the harvesting of it as we help it to thrive.
Right, harvesting and managing and
Right.
propagating and working with it, right?
Yep.
Well, I was surprised a moment ago when you mentioned that some of the bamboo, what type that you got from Joe Hollis.
No, not bamboo. There's no bamboo. We
Yeah, because
can
I'm like,
grow
you wouldn't have grown bamboo, but you got plants from Joe. What
Yeah.
was it called?
willow basket.
Willow,
basket
basket willow.
Yeah.
So I'm so thrilled because Joe's just a wonderful guy. I used to volunteer with the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project's local farm tour. And I would volunteer just so I could volunteer at his place, Mountain Gardens, and just stay there for a couple of days, bringing people in. I really enjoyed spending time around Joe and his beautiful library and all of that we had for so many years. And so I'm really happy to know that the basket willow that was planted as part of the Foster Creek restoration, that will live on.
Yeah, I got $100. I basically cut down all the willows he had in. I didn't know he had them labeled. The labels were buried. And he said, "Oh, you didn't get the names?" So I don't know what the names of them are, but they're all like amazing colors. They're goldens and different shades of green, chartreuse green and reds, all these different colors. And what you do, which I have never done, but we will eventually get, hopefully whoever gets the property will get people to learn to use those basket willows. And the way you use them is you cut them back and they do lots of straight shoots, and you harvest those shoots and then you dry them. And then once they're dried, you soak them again. And that is when they can be used for making willows. And that's after they dry from being soaked is when you get their true color. You don't even know what you're looking at is not necessarily their color, but they are going to be these various colors.
Wow.
And so I got $100 worth of cuttings. And from that, I was able to propagate about 800 or 900 basket willows, which went into this stream restoration. And it's one of the few non-natives, but I did careful research. There is an invasive. The gray willow is highly invasive, and you don't want to move that around. And it's here. It's in the Mills River area. It's in the area, and it's got a rounder leaf. It's not nearly as narrow. There's the native black willow, which is actually the second highest in salicylic acid, which is the basic ingredient in aspirin.
Right.
And it's like got all willows have extra floral nectaries. They all have both kinds of mycorrhizae, endo and ecto.
Yeah.
You can soak their new growth and use it for a plant rooting agent. They're just so useful. They're one of the first plants to flower in the springtime. So they're feeding, not even spring, late winter, mid-February to early February, they'll be flowering, and you'll see every hymenoptera, every wasp family plant, every insect on there. Plus you'll see some cucumber beetles. You'll see both the predators and the pest getting an early feed, and that's what you want. You don't worry about who's who. They take care of that between them, but the willow's out there feeding them. And that's the gift we got from Joe that is at Foster Creek. So Joe's presence will live on there. His fascination with plants. I mean, we think of them as Chinese medicinals. When I actually did the closest thing I ever did to an internship back in '78, I think, at Joe's. And I got there in the springtime, and I pulled up, and he said, "You grow the vegetables, I'll grow the flowers." He was into alpines.
Oh, wow.
Joe's never, he wants other people to grow vegetables, but he's now, I still think of him as being alive because his spirit isn't all of us.
Oh, apparently we're all still alive even when we lose our body.
We all got so much from Joe. And I just remember the joy of Ursula, my wife, and I going to his property just anytime we had a chance. We dropped off on Dooner, unfortunately. We got too busy, but it used to be that we'd say, "Let's go see Joe's garden." And we'd show up and go, "Hey," and we start walking around, and we'd always find something fascinating and new. And we go, and it was like, he always enjoyed it because particularly Ursula, really observant. So we would be noticing things that other people didn't notice. "Oh yeah, you got that," and it was always fun to get there. And one of the sad things for me was that because of he had his 15 minutes of fame, as he said, somebody came and did a YouTube of him, and he had like millions of views. He became super famous in the last few months of his life. And when I got an email from him, I was one of the few people that got the original email saying that, he was going to die. He had pancreatic cancer, stage 4. And he said one of the things he wanted to do was get his garden cataloged. I immediately emailed him and said, I will drop everything and help you do that. I never heard back from him. The reason was all of those YouTubes, you couldn't talk to him through email.
Everybody flooded him with contact
They couldn't begin to get through
information.
it. So I don't think he got it all cataloged. That's going to be for other people. But his, is it 2 acres or less on this steep hillside that he terraced and all that? The incredible diversity of plants there. I mean, just thousands of plants. Chinese medicinals, still alpines, all these different phases of Joe's fashion. He was there from the early 70s until just last fall.
November 7th, I remember the day that Joe Hollis left us was November 7th. And I did hear, how you talk about hearing in the halls or hearing people talking at Organic Growers School. I did hear Margaret Blomquist mugs. I did hear her say that she did get about 130 plants more cataloged at his place. So absolute plethora of diversity there at Mountain Gardens. And I did put in this live stream a link to Mountain Gardens. It's the website Mountain Garden Herbs, and it's a beautiful, beautiful website. You can see Joe Hollis there. You can learn more about the place. And I also put a link to the Stream Conference and Organic Growers School, among other things. So check out those links at your convenience.
And it's interesting, at the gathering for his funeral, we buried him on his property on a high point, quite a deep hole. But some young woman was talking. They had a group of people there who were with them for the death process. Somebody was always with them, and he just kept hanging on and not passing. And finally, this woman had been with him forever, fell asleep. And when she woke up, he passed.
Oh.
And she stepped outside, and there was a large shooting star.
Oh.
Take it for whatever it's worth.
Well,
Yeah.
everything is aligned in nature.
Yeah.
Everything is in divine order, even when it seems like it's absolutely, how could it be? Somehow. I feel his presence. We've got a beautiful video clip that we'd like to share with you of what we put together of Lee Barnes, Janine Davis, both honoring him at Organic Growers School, and also Cameron Farlow, Organic Growers School Executive Director, mentioning that honoring. And it was, he got honored as Educator of the Year a little late for him, but not for us. And certainly I'm sure he's aware somewhere and feeling that beautiful tribute and respect. So
And there's a lesson too from Joe as an educator, because one of the things I said, we all just talked about him, was that Joe wasn't really like a in-your-face kind of educator.
No.
He just he would be present, and if you had questions, he'd answer them with incredible depth.
incredible depth, really.
Incredible depth. But he presented several times, and he presented at the Growers School, and I used to be one of the people that looked at the evaluations. And him and Mark Schoenberg both got a bunch of really bad evaluations. And it was from people who decided they didn't know much because they talked softly. And they wouldn't make
Big
strong declarative statements. They would say things, but they would say, from what I know now, they
Right.
never, their modesty meant that some people figured they didn't know much. Both of those people know so much more
Yeah.
than like the huge array of other people. And it's all people saying, oh, they don't know much because they don't talk like they know much. Beware of people who convince you that they know a lot. And pay a lot of attention to people that don't spend much time talking about what they know, but just share information when you request it,
Yeah. Well, there's that saying, the more I know, the more I don't know. And that's the mark of a true learner, a true seeker of knowledge and wisdom, is someone who knows the more you learn, the more you know you don't know. And the process of discovery is endless, rather than someone who is trying to convince you of their stature of knowing, when really they don't need to defend that at all.
Sure of
Dr. Mark-
everything and
yeah.
assertive as all heck about it.
Yeah, Dr. Mark Schoenbeck is absolutely the most profound, super in-depth PowerPoint and teachings about cover crops I've ever seen. I still take his boron for beets trick. You can check that out, Dr. Mark Schoenbeck's video here on the channel. And that PowerPoint of his cover crop, over 162 slides or something. I mean, it's insanely in-depth and knowledgeable, is able to be downloaded on our website. So if you really want to learn about cover crops, we've got the pot of gold here as far as education with Living Web. Go to livingwebfarms.org, go to resources, and you can find that downloadable.
And he has a
thing just
soil
showing.
consultancy, and if people ask me, I'll give them some information about soil test, what I know, but I say, you really want to go deep? Talk to Dr.
Yeah, Dr. Schoenbeck.
And
of
he's
course,
incredibly
Joe.
reasonably priced too.
Oh yeah, and such a great joy to have time with him at the farm. And Joe, he would crack me up, because he taught at the farm once. He brings a presentation, and he just starts playing it, and then he just would talk about whatever he thought to talk about. It may or may not have anything to do with what was going on in the presentation, but people were learning and going wow, and couldn't believe it. And we also have a wonderful part of a workshop that Joe was part of with the healing modalities. Remember with the lady
With Margot Rossi. Yeah.
Margot Rossi and Joe Hollis is part
Early,
of
early
that.
in COVID, we got together and talked about plant medicine,
Yeah,
which I'm still appalled that our society didn't want to look at that. I think hundreds of thousands of people could have lived that didn't live if they just had used plant medicine. I'm not
right.
here to say don't use vaccines. I think vaccines can be a piece of the solution, but there are people that won't use them. And we were talking about plant medicine when there weren't vaccines. And
Right. We were
all
just trying to
these-
use what we have. Yeah.
all these plants are doing the thing. Indeed, I'm doing a radio show, radio interviews now for Asheville FM. You can
Hey.
hear it at 103.3 or live stream it, and just ashevillefm.org. Every Wednesday, the interviews play from 11 to 12, and then from 7 to 8 on Saturdays, and they're archived for a couple weeks. I'm hoping to get Rick Scalzo, the founder of Gaia Herb. He funded research at the Southwest, I think it was Southwest College of Plant Medicine or something like natural medicine. And they came up with, I think it's 3 or 4 plant combinations that they've proved, and they're patenting them, shut down the replication of the coronavirus. Each of them shut it down by 90%. They all work at different stages. They keep it from getting in. If it gets in, they shut it down.
Right.
They
Like
can
a
never say
synergistic-
that the way
yeah.
the FDA works. They can never claim that, but they've got the research, for in vitro for shutting it down, and they're looking at doing the research for in vivo. And so we had similar, I actually had similar combinations. I didn't have there's a plant, Arum palestinium, a calla lily, from the Middle East that was the #1 plant. But then the other 2 I used in all my mixes. I used Chinese skullcap and Coitonia cordata. And then I used from Stephen Herod Booner, another one of our elders who just passed, deep wisdom, who got letters from the FDA saying, you can't say this,
Right.
And we learned to use the leaf of elderberry. The leaf is actually stronger. You have to decoct it, or it can, cause nausea. It's all it'll do is cause nausea. It won't kill you.
Right. It's not a deadly thing.
Right. Though, but that's how plant medicine gets in trouble, because when we were doing that homesteaders conference last spring, I don't know if you heard the young woman. She was struggling with some stage 4 cancer. She was doing her own self-medication. She bought dried elderberry powder, and she was putting like a quarter cup in a smoothie. Well, a quarter cup of dried elderberry powder is off the charts.
Yeah,
that
that's a huge.
And so she ended up at the hospital with kidney failure.
Yeah. People
So then
don't.
doctors go, well,
understand.
elderberries are poisonous. It's like
Yeah, I know.
only if you're being clueless about them.
A swimming pool is deadly if you drown yourself in it.
Right, yeah.
You've got to
So
be careful.
You have to actually understand
Yeah.
plant medicine.
Have respect for
Study
dosage.
it, yeah.
Have respect for how the plant is recommended based on thousands of years of knowledge and wisdom.
And Joe did that. We actually shared I was in Florida and got elder leaf up before it was even out here, and I shipped it to Joe, and he made tincture. We all made tincture, and the people who used that tincture, the tinctures didn't keep us from getting the virus, but they say, oh, the vaccine will keep you from going to the hospital. Well, the tinctures kept you from going to the hospital too.
Right.
Everybody who
Yeah.
used those tinctures had mild symptoms.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, get a vaccine. If you're willing to get vaccines, that's a way to, now I think they're even saying the vaccine is reducing infection by 50%. I got vaccinated for that reason. I got vaccinated so I could help break the chain of the infection. But meanwhile, why don't we use these plants that actually reduce the level of replication?
Yeah, we have so many antiviral plants out there and foods like garlic. I'm trying to think, what was the name of that medicinal? And it was like Chinese healing wisdom video on the channel. But if you just do a search for Joe Hollis here on
Margot
Living With-
Rossi and Pat Battle.
Yeah, Pat Battle, Margot Rossi, but Joe Hollis, Hollis. You just do a search on the channel. I've thoroughly keyword tagged everything for whoever's in every video. So
Joe just went to
search
work.
for that.
Yeah.
And you can see Joe and just what we're talking about. If you've not met him, how quiet and just deeply present he is, and how in depth he will go with an answer. Brilliant man, just a brilliant man. So I was honored to know him. I was very honored to be able to shoot a little bit of a video clip that we did this weekend at the Organic Grower School, where he was honored as Educator of the Year. And look forward to learning more, because his wisdom carries on. Let's check out this clip.
One of the more special things I think about Organic Grower School in the spring.
There's Cameron
I think
Farlow.
a common belief that we can grow
We
and
have our
eat in a way that
audio
stewards the land and our ecosystems and also contributes to our community in meaningful ways. And especially for those of us in this room, we share a common willingness to share that knowledge, passion, and appreciation with others. And so at Organic Grower School,
would
we
venture that
really feel like it's important to
lot
recognize and
other
honor
people
those
at
of
the
us
conference could have
who are
done
really leading the way
testimonials
on those
and
fronts as educators and leaders. And so in 2017, we started giving the Organic Educator Award to recognize a local leader for their dedication, steadfastness, civic commitment, and responsibility in regards to organic education. And they've been doing it for 10 years or more, sometimes 20, 30, 40 years. And shortly after that, we started giving the Emerging Organic Educator Award to also recognize those leaders who may be just getting started in their educator journey, but they're already making a deep impact. And both of these awards are really to honor those in our midst who have made an ongoing and important contribution to the organic growing community in Western North Carolina and the Southern Appalachians. And so today, for this time, we're gonna honor a very special set of people. So first, for the Organic Educator Award, the Organic Grower School Board of Directors chose to honor Joe Hollis as the Organic Educator of the Year for 2024. And he was a plant person with a quiet yet enthusiastic appreciation for the natural world that was contagious. And he's most well known for the work and care he put into nurturing and growing the Paradise Garden and at Mountain Gardens. And I think he's touched the lives and hearts of many and is greatly missed throughout the community already. And we've invited Lee Barnes and Janine Davis, who are going to share some of their memories and experience with Joe over the years. So if you want to come up and speak, Lee.
Joe was a wonderful, quiet wizard, in my opinion. I met him 30 years ago, and Rhea, when we were doing issue to a journal. And Joe came up with a Paradise Gardening article, and it just blew the issue away. And it is on his website, so I highly recommend it. I'm a horticulturist. I've followed Joe's passion for plants and watched the garden grow over that time. And I'd just like to share a couple things. A good part of what Joe got started, he started sharing seeds. And there are international seed associations and botanical gardens that you can share with. And that's how he got started, I think. And I was amazed at his diversity. I especially loved his book collection. I was glad to hear that some was saved in the house, and there's a project to document those. As I understand it, Joe's goals for the land was to help develop a, I think, consensus community of 5 or 6 people, and live primarily off the land. Joe's real gift to me, I think, is seeding a community through his work with interns, with his podcasts, with his tours. I greatly admired that. I'll mention I wrote an article about Joe's wild seed saving back in the 90s, and I will post this on the community board wall, and you can probably take a picture of it. But at that time, he only had 300 different plants. What was the last count, or closer to 1,000 maybe? Probably well over. So, and I just love Joe. I lived hour and a half, 2 hours from him, so I didn't spend a lot of time except at events. The other thing I loved about Joe is that whenever we had the Southeastern Permaculture gathering, he always opened up the farm for tours. And we did a couple of work sessions there too. So I miss the guy. And more details people will follow with. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Janine Davis, and I'm a horticulturist and extension specialist with NC State, located over by the airport. And I met Joe, I think it was around 1990, and it was over our shared love of the woodland botanicals. In particular, at that time, it was ginseng and golden seal and ramps. And he taught me so much about those plants that, just from him working so closely with them. So I had all the academic knowledge, but he had that in the garden love knowledge, and that started our relationship. And I've always admired him for just his wisdom and how gently he passed that on. A very humble man, a very quiet man, very different from me. You know, I'm the loud, boisterous actress kind of speaker. And one of my fondest memories, and we were trying to remember which conference this was. I think it was an early sustainable agriculture conference. And Joe was a speaker, and I think he was talking on Chinese medicinal herbs that day. But they had this big room full of chairs and no microphone. Well, any of you that know Joe know that that just wasn't going to work. Very, very soft spoken. And so everybody in the audience came down and sat around his feet. And there were two little steps like this. And he sat down on those steps and he gave an 1.5-hour lecture to everyone sitting there like that. And not a sound. Everyone was so respectful. And those are the kind of memories I have, and how much he enjoyed sharing that kind of information. And I feel so honored that he allowed me to interview him for the book that Scott Persons and I wrote on growing and marketing ginseng and other woodland medicinals. So I'm so glad now that that's there. And that's our story and his approach to these plants. And unlike all the other people I interviewed that told you how to make money, he told you how to grow these plants and do it successfully and not make money. but still survive and live as well as he did. So yes, we miss him dearly. Thank you.
I want to salute the Hollis family because Joe was the driver, but there was an anchor and a son, and they were wonderful friends of ours, and the reason that I moved to the mountains was because of them. I don't have the words to tell you what these people mean in my life. And I am just one of hundreds of people that they touched. So I thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Here.
I think that's a legacy we all can hope to have. Thank you.
Oh, I'm gonna just drink.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, sorry. I guess I was muted just now. I apologize for that. What a loving tribute for so many people in our community to be able to reflect on the amazing ways that they have been positively affected and changed by Joe. Over the years, he has really helped grow the seed of gardening and the love for nature in so many people's hearts. And as you heard there with Dr. Richard McDonald, lovingly known also as Dr. McBug, he's the reason he moved here. And many other people have come to the mountains just to sort of bask in Joe's radiant glow. Quiet, dignified, a man of few words, but when you got him going on a topic, much depth and profound wisdom. We're so glad that we got to have him here for so many years. And I know, Pat, you had a lot of special time with him. What are some closing words you'd like to say about Joe as we wrap up this honoring of this wonderful person in our community?
Yeah, Joe, as I've already said, was a quiet teacher. He basically waited for questions. He was happy to observe with you and share and just revel in it all. But if you asked a question, he could just talk about things for a long time with passion. And he also gave me one of my mottos, which I pass on. I just had some, we were staying at a Airbnb on vacation, and That's someone I'd met before, and they said, yeah, every time I'm planting and I'm trying to figure out what to do next, I remember what you taught me, which is what Joe taught me, which is get it in the ground.
Get it in the ground.
Get it in the ground, it'll take care of itself.
Right.
That is like the motto that I got from Joe that I live by. You can look at those plants all day long and they're going to be kind of okay in those flats or in a seed bed or something, but you get them in the ground and nature takes over and they thrive. And Joe understood that. He understood that it's all about letting nature do what it does best. And he never had a moment, I think, that he wasn't fascinated, because nature is so endlessly fascinating, and that was what inspired him. And we definitely connected on that plane. We're kindred souls when it came to being guided by nature. And many another person, Lee Barnes, all kinds of people found a special connection with Joe based on that. And people can still, he's got a bunch of videos. You can make that connection with Joe. I recommend you do. You will be the wiser for it.
Right. And one of the videos that we have yet to get on our channel is the workshop with Joe Hollis. So that is yet to be coming out for you, new material. So you'll get to hear him live and in person, even though he's not live and in person any longer. We've got that footage for you, just as we do with Chuck Marsh and others. We really cherish that we have those videos available for you. And I want to say one more thing about Joe is to take his version of gardening to heart in your garden. And what does that mean? Joe did a kind of gardening he called paradise gardening. He would let everything go pretty much wild, and he would plant and interplant in ways you wouldn't even begin to imagine. He would get it in the ground and let nature do its thing. And that's how I garden. It's a little wild, but I have more insects and more diversity in my little area here than any of my neighbors, because I let nature thrive, and that's what Joe did. So try a little paradise gardening on, and you just might have a little more experience of paradise there in your garden.
And indeed, there is an article he wrote. It shows up here and there. It's in some collections called Paradise Gardening.
Oh.
And it's like incredibly powerful. As far as I know, it's the only writing of Joe's that is published, but it's a really succinct description of his philosophy and quite inspired him. Hopefully, maybe somebody will republish it.
Well, I'm going to try to find that, and I'm going to put a link in this video when I find it, because I want you to know about paradise gardening, and especially coming from the intellectual mind and soul of Joe Hollis. He's really something and offers just such a touch of a perspective. So I want to find that article, Pat, and let's see if we can get that propagating out there.
It's actually about much more than gardening. It's the philosophy of life.
Philosophy of life.
Joe was definitely into living lightly on the planet and taking sustenance from nature rather than from all of the fossil fuel generated consumer goods that people are so attached to now, that may, if we don't get a little wiser, bode poorly for the future of us and our relationship with the planet.
Right,
Joe
his whole
figured
philosophy.
out, a long time ago, that you don't need all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, his whole philosophy and way of life is one worth emulating. And actually, urgently, we need to be emulating that kind of model. Well, thank you, Joe. We see you, we hear you, you're out there, we know it, we love you, and just wanted to make sure we did this tribute here today, and look for more from Joe Hollis as a wonderful educator here on our channel. Well, Pat, you are a gardening expert, organic growing, regenerative, all the observations that you tell us to be aware in the garden. Just be out there and do what's right. We are on the spring equinox now, and it's time to plant certain things. We still know here in the mountains we can get some, well, even snow in May. I mean, I've seen big snow. We can still freeze for a while. Now, a while back, our last frost date was moved up by a month some years ago to April 15th or something rather than May.
Yeah, that's a fantasy.
Yeah, that's a fantasy. Well,
We
it
have
might have,
capricious weather here.
yeah, maybe it happened sometime, but I've seen a snowstorm in May.
The charts are good for the lows. They're good about telling us how low it's likely to get. I mean, last year we went down to 0, and a few places went below 0. But we used to be charted to go to 10 below. We haven't seen that in a while. When I visited Joe, he reported, I drove through from California, and we drove through Tennessee, and there were all these dead pines. And I said, Joe, what happened? He said, we went to 40 below.
Oh,
That just isn't happening anymore. But
right.
And some people disputed that. I know someone said, no, it never got to 40 below. But Joe paid attention to the weather.
Right.
People that are growers that are deeply into it, they're watching the weather because you got plants that you got to make sure you
Right.
got.
So
in the right
you don't
place.
get
Yeah.
overly excited about throwing everything out there just because it's
Yeah.
spring, right? We know that in the mountains. Now, maybe if you're down in Texas or South Carolina somewhere or somewhere deeper south, you can do that.
Well, you
But
can
no-
know the plants that can take it, and
But,
they
yeah.
can be out. Now's the time to be putting a lot of plants in the ground.
Right. So for now, and
Yeah.
we're here in Western North Carolina, we're sitting right now in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville. What is good to get going out there right now that you're pretty safe with?
So a caveat with that, okay?
Okay.
Before we start, I think it was probably about 87 or 88. I had my spring garden out there. It was booming. And then we had temperatures in the 70s, high 70s and 80s in early April. And then like the third week of April, it went to 19.
Ooh.
Everything died. Kale, collards, everything. They were growing too fast and too lush. These things are super hardy. I had collards and kales that survived that 0 degree weather with no protection, but they'd had plenty of cold to get used to it. If instead they're growing really fast, they got lots of water in their cells, and they're not used to having to get it out, they don't get it out quick enough and they die. So you have to be aware of that. You have to be ready with row cover to protect your plantings if we have surprise weather. And what you have to worry about is those times when it's been really warm and then suddenly it crashes and goes really cold. And we get that in the mountains not infrequently. There's a great Easter freeze about maybe 20 some years ago, I think now, where I was doing the radio show at WCQS in those days. Everybody who had Japanese maples lost them. It killed all the Japanese maples. It just like wiped out all kinds of things because once again, it was March in the 70s. And then for Easter, which was in early April, it was in the low teens. And so we get that in the mountains. So you have to be ready for that. If you live in a place with a little bit less capricious weather and a more gradual swing in temperatures, then maybe you don't have to worry about it. But here, have your row cover ready. It's not much. Just throw that row cover over. Those plants can take the cold, but if they've had all this warmth, they're not used to it and they need a little more time. In the end, they'll freeze solid and they'll be fine. But if they freeze before they get the water out of their cells, those cells rupture and they're dead. So you got to be ready for that. But right now, all the brassicas, all the salad plants, the lettuces, arugulas, the Chinese salad mustards, you could be planting all of those right now. If you got plants, put them in the ground. If you got seeds, put them in the ground. If you have seeds, you might want to warm the soil a little bit with some plastic for a day or two so it warms up. And then once it's in, you might even think about putting row cover over it so you get a little quicker germination because germination can still be slow. I actually like this time to plant peas. You can put them out earlier, but in my experience, the ones that go out about this time and over the next 10 days or so tend to do better. They don't get any of the insult of the colder weather. They just pop up and they just race ahead and do great. What I do like to do with peas is to soak them. Don't soak them too long. They'll actually break in half, but soak them until you see that radical, that white first root just start to swell. You don't even want it to pop. You just want to see it start to swell. And then remember with peas, to quote Jim Stockwell, who was in that picture in the tribute for Joe, peas float. You
Right.
got to
They
watch your
float.
peas. They're going to come up. So what you want to do is plant them and then mulch the heck out of them. And then that tends to keep them from floating. And don't worry, they'll come right up through that.
Yeah.
You could also be planting fava beans now, but if you're going to plant fava beans, get them in the ground right away. They don't want to mature in heat. You can plant all kinds of roots, things like carrots and stuff. Once again, with carrots and onions, if you're direct seeding, you want to have that soil warmed a little bit, maybe put some row cover over it so that they get the germination to happen because they germinate more slowly in the colder soil. So if you catch a warm day and then get them in and then cover it with row cover so you keep that heat in, then they'll get up. And once they're up, they're off to the races. They're going to do great. You might be thinking now, I have like a stage strategy for growing tomatoes and peppers. I actually start some really early, but don't start them now if you can't get them in the ground or step them up. Because what'll happen is it'll be too soon. Frost will still be likely to happen. And if you can't protect from frost, which isn't that hard, you can use things like wall of water or make a quick cloche. And if you get deep cold, throw some fabric over the plants and then the plastic over that. And you can pull them through that, final few frost But if you can't get them in the ground, then don't start them yet. But if you can get them in the ground or step them up, then now's a great time to start tomatoes and peppers. I think of it as my pioneer crop, just so I get to eat some early. And then I'll start my, put them up and save them or have endless abundance crop a little later, maybe in the middle of April. Because by the time I put them out, then I don't have to worry about frost. I can just stick them right in the ground. But it's a fine time to start enough peppers, enough tomatoes, enough eggplant, so you get that early taste. A little bit early for cucumbers yet here, a little further south off the mountain. Definitely you could be starting cucumbers now. All those crops that you want to get in sometime after the last frost date, you can start them if you are ready to get them in bigger plants, in bigger pots, or get them in the ground with protection. So any of those can be started. Eggplant is probably the one I would least recommend starting now because it really doesn't like the cold at all.
Yeah, it will be very unhappy. It won't
But
do well.
if you're willing to step it up, and that's actually part of the solution, eggplant, as Joe used to say, you put an eggplant in the ground, you get the flea beetles from the surrounding 4 counties. They just, every flea beetle in the world wants to hit that eggplant, and people lose their eggplants all the time. So if you start it now and then put it into like a quart pot, you'll have this big, huge, gorgeous plant. Obviously, you're not going to start a 70-foot row and put them in quart pots. But if you're only going 3 or 4, you can put them in a quart pot, put them out in the nice days. You don't even have to have a greenhouse. There's enough warm days. Make them sit in a window for the few cold days. Bring them in on the cold nights. Don't let them go below 50. They'll stunt. And then get them in the ground once the danger of frost is past, or maybe even a little early with a lot of protection, and you'll get way ahead and you'll get those eggplant.
Right, because with the eggplant, you didn't mention, the reason you get them big is because at a certain point, the flea beetles will not get on them, right? You have to
Well,
have
they're still on it, but they can't keep up. The plant can outgrow them.
Yeah.
Earlier on,
I've
the flea
gotten-
beetles.
I've gotten eggplants completely eaten to shreds by that.
Once they're big enough, it's not a problem. You can also solve that problem, by the way, by simply drenching them with neem extract. And that makes them inedible to everything. And so the flea beetles won't bother it, the spider mites won't bother it, but that's expensive. If you get a big plant, the flea beetles can have their way with it, and it doesn't matter because the plant is growing faster. And as we learn over and over again, when plants are attacked by insects, they produce more antioxidants.
Yeah.
The food is better for you. So you don't necessarily have to stop attack from insects. You just have to be sure that your plants can withstand it.
Yeah.
Indeed, there's a relationship. There's some people out there that talk about, if you do this, that, and that right and everything, you get no insect predation. Maybe that's the case, but that's not necessarily the healthiest food.
Yeah, that's not nature.
Minor insect predation is part of how plants actually are healthier. And indeed, Dr. McBug, Richard McDonald, and I like to teach that you can actually have up to 40% damage by the various cabbage worms, the imported cabbage worm, the cross-striped cabbage worm, and the plant will actually produce more broccoli. Wow. Because of acquired systemic immune response. When the plant gets attacked, it kicks into high gear and is actually more vigorous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something people, we're so, industrialized. Food makes beautiful plants, maybe devoid of nutrition, and they have to look perfect. But then we find out some of the ones that are the most chewed up have even more beneficial antioxidants in them. So we've really got to get aware of that. It's such an amazing fact.
Yeah. Another thing to know is, like, if you're into gambling and have a short time frame, long day onion, you can still start them. But mostly right now, you probably want to get plants, or you can get the bulbs from people who have the right kind of bulbs. My friend at Troy's Greenhouse always has good bulbs. It's interesting because he has one bucket full of bigger bulbs, starts, and then a bucket full of smaller ones. The smaller ones are more expensive. Now you get more because they're smaller, but also they're less likely to bolt. So you could buy a bunch of those. What I recommend, if you're doing that, if you're buying the sets, then you want to buy a handful, put them in really thick, and then harvest out in between them till they get about 4 inches apart or 5 inches apart, and use those for green onions. But you can also kind of pick and look which one looks most vigorous. But some of those are going to go to seed. That's why it's better to start plants. But now you're kind of on the edge about starting plants. I didn't get as many plants as I started. I got a few hundred, but I wish I actually started about 300-400 more of different ones. I'll just have to wait till next year. I bought a whole bunch of different red onions. And when you're buying onion plants, you want to pay attention to what your latitude is. You want to have the right latitude for your plants. There's long day plants and short day plants, and we're kind of right on the cusp. my favorite plants around here for us are the day neutrals, but we can do okay with long day, and there's even a few short days that'll work. But if you live further south, then you're going to want short day plants. If you live further north, you're going to want long day plants. You want to pay attention to that because they won't do as well if you don't pay attention to that. And then beets, you can sow beets. As Lisa said, you got to make sure you have the boron or you're not going to be happy. But once again, I find that sowing beets this time of year, they really are insulted by the capricious weather. Those deep cold weathers will actually take a lot out of them. They'll expend a lot of energy trying to weather that deep cold. And I find that for this time of year, starting your beets in 6-packs or whatever, starting indoor plants and transplanting them out gives me a much nicer beet. And I recommend right now, if you have access to early wonder tall top, that's my favorite spring beet. It's one of the fastest ones, and it does not like the heat of later in the season. But right now, you can get a wonderful crop of early wonder tall top. Really delicious, lush greens, a wonderful beet. So there's loads to start right now. You could be busy all the time starting plants right now. Successions of all the salad greens, all the cooking greens. Time to get all the broccoli starting. I'm getting more and more into the sprouting broccolis. I'm less and less looking for the big heads. I just like the endless yields of things like Parasiba that just keeps yielding over a long, long period of time. And it's actually pretty heat tolerant and has a really great flavor. So lots of things to start right now. A little early for beans, a little early for squash. Those even if you're going to start those in as plants, they grow so fast that you would have to start them in a really big cell right now.
Yeah.
So you want to wait till about the middle of April or something. If you're going to put them out, be ready to put row cover over them. Maybe towards the end of April here in our climate in the mountains, if you're not going to protect them, so you can put them out later. Or you can wait until after the last frost and put them directly in the soil, and they'll take off really quick.
Yeah.
It's also time to be starting flowers. Indeed, it's a little late for things like bachelor buttons and calendula, which are those cool weather flowers. If you can buy those right now, you want to get those out so that all the parasitoids and predators that feed on nectar and pollen and then lay their eggs, the parasitoids often lay their eggs next to or in the pest, and they need nectar and pollen. The predators will actually eat the pests, things like lacewing larvae and ladybugs and stuff. But if they don't have those, they can still thrive. Things like the minute pirate bug, they can still thrive if you've got plenty of pollen producing plants. So you want to get those flowers out. Don't just think about vegetables, but think about flowers. So you get not only beauty, but the deep diversity you need to control all those insect pests.
Yes, and we need more. We need more insects out there. We've been having a great insect loss. Some say up to 80% insects are missing in Europe. We're really going too far between habitat loss and pesticide use and electrifying the whole planet.
And
There's a
climate
lot
change,
going
actually,
on. Yeah,
it's
climate
out of whack.
change.
They're on a cycle where they hatch out, but the plants are already further along and they can't feed as well on the leaves.
Yeah.
There's just things are out of whack, and it's costing big time for the insects. And
Yeah.
so another one that you could actually plant them out, I'd say towards the end of March, if you're just willing to, if there's deep cold cover, they can take a slight frost, and that's sunflowers.
Oh,
And you want to be sticking something, they're not frost hardy, but they can take a light frost.
Yeah.
So if you think you're a little bit off the mountain and you're not going to get a hard frost again, they'll take a light frost when they're young. And if you're, surprised by colder weather, just throw some row cover over them and then just keep putting successions of them out. Likewise, time to sow directly in the ground and in starts, cilantro and dill. Because they're going to go to seed real fast and they're going to be feeding the beneficials and you get to eat it, and you want to sow successions of them over and over again, maybe every 10 days to 2 weeks, be putting seeds in the ground so you have one success. Then you don't worry about the fact that they went to seed. You go, oh, great, more flowers for my insects. And later on, dill seed and coriander, are what you get. So you still get the, you get the greens as a seasoning now. Then you get the flowers as food for the beneficials. The flowers are also edible for you, but I like the insects that get to feed on them. And then you get the seeds, which is more seed to plant, so you don't have to keep buying it. You can succession sow, but you also get to use those for seasoning. And indeed, both of them are incredibly aromatic and flavorful in the green stage.
Right. And cilantro is pretty cold tolerant.
Totally, it's one of the most
Yeah,
cold tolerant
very
things there
cold
is, yeah.
tolerant.
It'll
So
take
get that
any
cilantro
cold,
out
yeah,
there right away.
Absolutely. It's going to germinate slower, so get it in the ground yesterday and then keep sowing it.
Right.
And
Thinking in terms of successions with
Yes.
those, some of those herbs.
People complain that it bolts so quickly.
Yeah.
I tell a joke that, like, people say you can buy a slower bolting cilantro, and I go, I've timed it. It actually is slower. It's at least 45 minutes slower. But
It's very
that's
fast, right?
not a problem. That's actually a benefit because you can have plants flowering immediately, and that's what you want. Within a matter of a couple weeks after you plant it, it's going to be flowering, and that's going to be food for the beneficials. Buckwheat, likewise. Buckwheat can actually take a very light frost, very light, and so it'll be flowering. Depending on how warm it is, that determines how quickly it flowers, but it'll be flowering pretty darn early, so you can have a lot of nectar and pollen sowing throughout your garden, just a little patch here and there of things like buckwheat, cilantro, and dill.
Right. So think more in terms of when you're not waiting to have a big harvest yet, think in terms of feeding all your beneficial insects, which will in turn help you have that great harvest later. And then when you see those flower umbels coming up, don't think, oh gosh, it's already going to seed, it's bolting. Just enjoy that and plant some more. Great
And
ideas.
celebrate it. And indeed, we'll be bringing bouquets of calendula and bachelor buttons in later on. We'll be bringing bouquets of all kinds of other flowers. They're cutting flowers for us, but they're food for the beneficials. And I'm continually learning about all these flowers that also are food for us. There's a
Oh,
whole
wow, edible flowers.
world of, I just learned about another coreopsis that's actually edible,
Oh, wow.
And so you're constantly surprised by, plants that you don't even know that they're edible, but the greens are edible and stuff.
Right. Well, I know calendula
Calendula,
has
excellent.
two key ingredients for growing the rods and cones in your eyes that detect color, and that has zeaxanthin and lutein. So get that calendula flower and put it in your salad. Eat it when it's in full radiance, and that, as along with dinosaur kale, also has zeaxanthin and lutein. So it's fun to learn about the benefits of the different plants as you go along the way, not only for the insects, but for yourself, and have fun.
Yeah,
Have fun
there's
doing it.
actually, I'm going to be getting seed this year for Cleome gynandra, which is African cabbage. So it's a Cleome that's grown for the greens.
Oh, wow.
And it's also got the advantage to be very, very high in mustard oils, which means that it's a magnet for harlequin bugs.
Oh,
So that's going to be how I monitor for harlequin bugs.
oh, right. You
and
can
we
do a
learned-
trap crop.
we learned from John Henry Nelson one really wet day when there was nothing else for the interns to do, making a liar out of me. I predicted we were going to be covered up by harlequin bugs because they wouldn't pull the collars because they were so gorgeous and they could take so many to bounty. And so I said, we need a rotation. They didn't do it. So I was off, and instead all the interns and all the farmers at Living Web went out and picked every harlequin bug, and most importantly, all the eggs. When I picked all those eggs, I said, okay, well, that's a lot of work, but you did it. Don't throw the eggs away. Put the eggs in a container where tiny little wasps can fly out of those eggs, but the harlequin bugs can't crawl out. They did that.
Oh, wow.
Waves and waves of wasps flew out, and we amplified the impact of the Baconian wasp that controls harlequin bugs. And so we had way fewer, the baby harlequin bugs couldn't get out, but every last parasitoid got out. And so we had way fewer harlequin bugs than we normally would. And you can do that. That's my plan with the African cabbage. When it gets totally covered up, I'll have harvested all the greens I want. I'll have gotten to see the flowers. I'll pull those plants and I'll move them, not that far because these are weak flyers, but far enough that the harlequin bug will never make it to my garden, but those wasps will.
Right.
Or as I said to Richard, the other solution would be to make a cage, and cover it with a fine fabric that was just fine enough that the little tiny wasps could get out, but the bugs could not. And then it would be an endless supply of parasitoids coming out from that cabbage. So
Oh, that's great. So if you didn't quite catch that, so the parasitic wasp parasitizes the eggs of the harlequin bugs. And so Pat didn't want those harlequin eggs, but then he allowed those little embryonic wasps in there to, when they were going to emerge, to be able to come out and then help create more balance in the garden. Brilliant.
Yeah,
I had
and
no idea you
the
could do
harlequin bugs cannot find their way out. So I don't even know that you can buy a parasitoid for the harlequin bug. Maybe you can, but I'm a little leery of bringing in parasitoids if they're generalizers.
that. Right. They might.
For attacking
much.
true bugs, which the harlequin bug is a true bug, because there's a whole bunch of predaceous true bugs, like the two-spotted stink bug, like the soldier bug. These are, I've got wonderful pictures of those guys just sticking their proboscis in, dissolving that insect and sucking the juices out of it. I don't want to control those.
Right.
So instead, what I want to do is create natural systems and then amplify those systems so that they're a little bit stronger than the natural system, and then we get control.
Excellent. See, working with nature, and then nature's already got this brilliant orchestration of how it's going to function. Learning about what that is and working with it, then we have great benefits.
And actually, I'm convinced that the only economy that'll work for the future will be a natural economy.
Right.
I think we're post-capitalism, post-socialism, both of those are extractive. Both of those approach the world as if we can keep taking and taking from nature. And at this point, we've been lousy tenants, and Gaia's going to decide to say, you're evicted unless we figure out how to work with nature. And my vision for how the world will work in the future will be that the plant whisperers, the insect whisperers, are the valued positions. People will learn about that in school. They'll learn about that from being in place. They'll learn about it from their elders, and they need to be rewarded. Like right now, we reward the producers of video games.
Right, like learning more plants, learning more insects rather than more logos and more, just distract your brain into infinity loop.
People
stuff.
say we cannot afford the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is not nearly green enough.
No,
And
you can't not afford.
anybody who looks at what it's costing us to deal with the ever and ever worsening climate disasters understands that we can't afford not to go to a way greener economy that values the wisdom of the indigenous peoples, the wisdom of being in nature, the wisdom of people like Joe, and rewards people for learning how to work with that and dynamically bring us incredible wealth and health.
And
actually,
eating more healthy food, and our whole quality of life will increase, right?
This whole forest bathing thing, it's just like, I love these terms, but it's like, yeah, it's true. We are healthier when we're connected to nature.
Absolutely.
If we're not connected to nature, we're not as healthy.
We lose track, and we are very much in need of that connection.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad we got to connect today with you, and whether you're here live or whether you'll be seeing this in the future, we're very honored to be part of your growing into more gardening, more planting. I want to offer you the opportunity to ask Pat a question right now. If you've got any questions, we've got several different people in the chat commenting, some folks from Canada, British Columbia here, people talking about their kale, red kale, and talking about some pine juice as an insect repellent and things. Is there any questions? Do you have them? We've got one person saying, what is Joe's website? Look right here in the description of the live stream. You can see it. It is Mountain Garden Herbs, I believe, but let me go ahead and read that for you and check that off. Yep, we've got links for Organic Grower School, which is organicgrowerschool.org. Mountain Gardens is mountaingardensherbs.com. Okay, mountaingardensherbs.com. Again, that is in the description of the live stream here. And we also have the Southeastern Permaculture Gathering website there, as well as the National Stream Restoration Conference link. So those are there for you. And I want to make a note to put the link later of the Paradise Gardening article I want to find from Joe, right?
I want to encourage people to check out Chris Hubbard and the Indigenous Seed Rematriation Project.
Okay.
Chris is doing incredible work, and Chris has been giving and giving and giving and not taking care of himself. He's got a couple of GoFundMes happening right now. He's asking for so little money. He just needs a little bit of help so he can continue to get these seeds out and get a safe, secure home. And check out Chris Hubbard, the Indigenous Seed Rematriation Project. He's about getting seed back to all the. He has got incredible quantities of seeds that he's saved. He's given over 300,000 seed packets away. He writes the story of every seed packet on it. And he gives not only the seed, but the history, the story of the seed. And he's giving these seeds away for free. And he needs a little bit of help right now. So please check out Chris Hubbard. And if you have the ability to donate to those GoFundMes, they're well worth supporting. Just a little bit of money might help get him over the top. And that's what we need to do. We need to always be in support of those that are supporting us.
All right, well, let's find that link and I will put that in the description when I find it for you. Chris Hubbard with the Seed Rematriation Project.
Chris is spelled K-R-I-S.
KRS, but we'll put the link and it'll
Yeah.
be easier to find.
Yep.
Hopefully get some more support for him. And I don't see any other questions here in our chat right now. So I just want to say thank you for being here. Please share the educational resource that we offer on Living Web Farms. You can go onto the search bar and just enter your topic if you're wondering how to start seeds here in this great time of getting all the garden gumption going. Go to seed starting. Just look up seed starting and you'll find a bunch of videos with Pat in the greenhouse showing you exactly what to do and how to do it in a good, efficient way.
And actually, if you have insect questions for next time,
Oh, yes.
get a picture if you don't know what the insect is and send it to Living Web Farms. Send it to Lisa at livingwebfarms.org. She'll have it ready so that we can look at the picture while we're talking about it. We'll get Dr. McBug to call in or come in and we'll answer insect questions next time. And we'll do that throughout the active insect period. We'll do that at least every other month, hopefully maybe even every month. We'll have a segment where Dr. McBug can answer those questions. I can answer a bunch of them, but boy, he can identify so many more insects than I can.
A world-leading entomologist, happens to be a dear, wonderful resource for us and a good friend and a wonderful guy. You saw him there in the video clip honoring Joe about inspired to move to the mountains by Joe. So Dr. Richard McDonald, Dr. McBug, you can check out his videos, Meet the Beetles, right here on our channel, talking about the Laricobius nigrinus beetle, predator beetle that he introduced to help mitigate the damage of the woolly adelgid on hemlocks.
Literally why we are not losing our hemlocks
Yeah.
in Western North Carolina is Dr. Richard McDonald.
Pretty much single-handedly has restored an entire ecosystem up at Grandfather Mountain. I mean,
Well, and it's spread. I mean,
Yeah.
Philo,
Yeah.
where I live, the hemlocks are all fine. There's just a few. Basically, now there's patch dynamics. Instead of this
Right.
outbreak that's killing trees, first the pest shows up, enough show up, and then boom, Laricobius nigrinus is in there,
Yep.
just ripping those guys apart. And Richard is teaching people how to move those around. He found out that they were on the West Coast. It was legal to bring them here, and he just brought them here. Other people were trying to
snuck
figure
them
out
in
how to
his
raise
luggage.
them. He made endless trips to the West Coast where he found those beetles. He figured out how to tell, where they were by using an ultraviolet light. You could see their frass.
over 100 trips back and forth bringing these beetles here
Yep.
to predatorize the woolly adelgid to create balance in the ecosystem. Amazing
He's also now
entomologist. Absolutely amazing.
responsible for introducing the winsome fly, Esquita fly, which is actually now he's got it started up in the Boone area, and they move I think it's 20 miles a year. They're going to be here. He's responsible for teaching people how to feed the Typhia wasp, the spring Typhia wasp. Both of those are controlling Japanese beetles. The winsome fly or Esquita fly actually lays its egg in the neck of the females, and once that egg is in the neck of the female is dead. And of course, you can have all the males you want, but no females, there's no future for that insect. So he's, what used to be a huge problem for us as far as Japanese, and he's actually now being hired by a whole bunch of states that have legalized cannabis because Japanese beetles are being a huge problem, and they're solving that problem by bringing Dr. McDonald out to solve the insect problem. So we will answer those kind of questions. We'll talk about insects. Send your pictures and your questions, and we'll cover that next time.
Yes, that is so exciting. I have been wanting to have Dr. McBug get on here with us for quite a while now and was talking to him about it. And I really respect and admire the work he's doing. It's world-changing work to be so proud of. What a life to be proud of, the things he's doing. So we're going to have Dr. McBug here on the show. We're going to let you know when, get those insect questions together, and he will be able to answer them in abundance. It's going to be very fun, and I look forward to that soon. We'll be shooting for in about a month. And we'll be doing a monthly live stream, maybe more if we want, but definitely each month right here on livingwebfarms.org. Any final words you'd like to say today, Pat?
Get it in the ground.
Get it in the ground.
And get outside and enjoy the wonder of spring. Go see those spring ephemerals.
Oh, yes.
Maybe stumble across someplace, if you're in the mountains, some branch lettuce. This incredibly rare food that you only find in the coves where there's these seeps or these streams that just are kind of misty. And growing around it, there's going to be all kinds of edibles, the spring beauties. There's all kinds of food out there which you can taste gently from. You don't want to be over harvesting. There's too many of us now. but you can learn how our ancestors and how the indigenous peoples were totally fed by the natural world. And you can see how we can be fed again, and how we can pay attention to the wisdom of E.O. Wilson, which basically said we have to give 50% of the planet back to the wild. And we can do that without actually changing much. We can have the wild everywhere. We can actually mimic the wild in our yards. The future yard in America, if we're to have, a world that we can actually survive in, is going to be a bit of a jungle, a bit of glorious life, riotously gorgeous. And that's the direction we got to go. I look forward to the day that instead of there being an ordinance whereby you get in trouble if you have wildflowers growing and let a few weeds happen and stuff, you get an award for having the arborage, the best arborage in your community. We have to let the wild come back.
All right, so let that wild come back in your life, in your garden, in your kitchen. Eat something wild every day and really revel in what is so abundantly there for us. And I just want to mention one more thing. There is a growing forest farmers conference this weekend coming up. And I know Lee Barnes is on the way up there, both with Mark Williams and Adam Bigelow. They're all carpooling together up there. So
I was
forest
totally
farming.
tempted. I wish I had the time to go.
Yeah, me too. I'm here with you, but we're enjoying it. But forest farming, gardening in your yard, stream restoration, it's all there. And we can be on the cutting edge of helping make the world a better place every day by working with nature and building life. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for being here, Pat. And we'll talk
Always a
to you
pleasure.
very soon.
Okay.